the beginning of the story, a woman witnessed a terrifying event. A strange, deadly virus had spread across the earth. Once infected, a person's body gradually hardened, becoming as hard as stone. Everyone would turn into marble, each according to their color. But when the entire body turned to stone, even that stone would break, leaving only dust and dirt. The story begins in an apartment where some teenagers were partying. Amidst the revelry, a man took a tattoo machine from his drawer and carved a strange symbol on the hand of a drunk girl. Due to the alcohol, the girl, named Alpha, felt the tattoo needle but didn't react much. By evening, she returned home a little tired. Alpha's mother, noticing her daughter's odor, became furious. She took Alpha to the bathroom and began bathing her in hot water. When she took off Alpha's coat, she saw the tattoo. Her mother yelled, "Where have you been? Why did you get this tattoo?" Alpha was shocked and said, "I don't know." Hearing this, her mother became very angry, but behind this anger was fear. Her mother worked as a nurse, and her true fear was the petrification virus. No one knows where this virus came from or how it spread. The worst part is that it can remain in the body for a very long time without doing anything. By the time humans learned about this virus, it had already spread throughout the world. Almost half the world had been infected. Alpha's mother was worried that a dirty needle might have been used to get her tattoo. She quickly disinfected the area with alcohol and told her to come to the hospital tomorrow for a tetanus shot. That evening, Alpha heard her mother muttering angrily. She thought she was probably talking about her, so she stormed off to her room. Looking at the building in front of her, an idea came to her mind. She put on her shoes and coat, grabbed her backpack, and prepared to flee. But as she stepped onto the balcony, the building began shaking due to the strong storm. Despite the danger, Alpha escaped. Hearing her daughter's screams, the mother ran to the bathroom. Alpha was hanging on, desperately trying to save herself. Suddenly, the building began to shake and the storm subsided. After that, the mother rescued her daughter and took her inside. Seeing her mother deeply saddened, Alpha hugged her and repeatedly apologized. This time, her mother didn't scold her. She simply said, "It's okay. Be careful in the future." The next morning, Alpha went to the hospital where her mother worked. The nurse prepared a tetanus injection, but Alpha was afraid of the injection. The nurse thought that if Alpha didn't trust her, she would call her mother. But Alpha stopped her and said, "I will administer the injection myself." To find out if her daughter was carrying the virus, Alpha's mother asked the nurse to take a sample. However, the hospital already had plenty of samples. It's impossible to test immediately. The nurse said the results would come in 2 weeks. Alpha's mother was checking on patients in the ICU, but the corridor, which used to be crowded, was now completely deserted. No one even came to serve her dinner yesterday. It turned out that all the nurses had resigned, fearing this dangerous virus for which there's no vaccine. The patients' conditions were very serious. Those with more than 85% infection could no longer care for themselves. Their entire bodies had frozen. This virus doesn't spread through the air, so it's currently under control. When she went to the innermost part of the ward, she witnessed a horrific scene. A patient who was conscious yesterday had turned completely stone-like. Seeing the patient lying on the hospital bed, she calmly removed the sensors from his body and said a respectful goodbye to him in his final moments. Because of the trip to the hospital, Alpha was late for her morning class today. When it was time to submit homework, the teacher called Alpha over. But as Alpha turned around, a wound on her hand burst, which she hadn't noticed. Blood spilled onto the desk, shocking the class. Everyone panicked. Alpha tried to explain, "It was just a cut on my hand." But the fear of the virus was so intense that everyone assumed Alpha had been infected. To prevent panic, the teacher sent Alpha to the school's doctor's room. All her friends were looking at her strangely, and Alpha was deeply saddened by this, but she had no choice. She packed her books and quickly left the classroom. As Alpha left, a boy named Adrian ran after her. Adrian and Alpha were actually in love. Returning home, Alpha was about to rest for a while, but as she turned around, she saw an extra bed in her room. Confused, she went into the living room and saw everything in disarray. She thought a burglar had broken into the house and called her mother, but as she returned to her room, she saw a strange man lying inside. Terrified, Alpha hid in the kitchen. She locked the door, but the man kept knocking from outside. Alpha picked up a small knife from the table and told the man not to come near her, but the man didn't care. She told Alpha, "Don't be afraid." He told her, "I'm your uncle, your mother's younger brother. When you were little, you grew up in my lap." But Alpha didn't remember having an uncle. If she really had one, why hadn't he ever come forward in the last 10 years? In the face of Alpha's suspicion, her uncle, Amin, simply said that his health was poor and he lived in different places. "I just got back." He had no place to live, so he had come to stay at their house. Amin's words seemed plausible, but Alpha couldn't believe him. As she tried to remember if she really had an uncle, Amin stepped forward and snatched the knife from her hand. Just then, Alpha's mother came home from work. Seeing her mother, Alpha immediately ran for help. Her mother said she had met her uncle. Now it was clear that Amin was telling the truth. Anyway, Alpha later went to the hospital for sample collection, but due to the large number of patients, she had to wait in the inquiry area first. As Alpha sat down, she saw her English teacher bring in an infected old man. Alpha said hello to him. After the sample was collected, Alpha returned to school and resumed classes, but during sports class, the wound on her hand re-inflamed, staining the volleyball with blood. Seeing the blood on the ball, her classmates looked at Alpha with disgust and hatred. Her teacher, too, feared that Alpha might be infected and told Alpha to quickly go and get treatment. As Alpha turned back, her teacher was wrapping the ball in a towel and throwing it in the dustbin. Alpha felt very bad being isolated from her friends. Adrian also seemed a little scared. When Alpha realized that Adrian also thought she was infected, she angrily left the gym. After school, Alpha and her mother went to her grandmother's house. It was Eid, and all the family and friends had gathered there for dinner. But as she reached the stairs, Alpha saw two men sleeping in the hallway, and several needles littered the floor. Leaving the hallway, they went to her grandmother's house. Alpha's uncle and the others had already arrived. Alpha saw Amen go into a room, and her mother followed. Through a small gap in the door, Alpha saw Amen lying unconscious on the floor. Due to the misbehavior of the children at school, Alpha spat on a girl during swimming class. In revenge, the children tried to drown Alpha in the pool, causing his head to crack. The school expelled Alpha. When her mother examined Alpha at home, Alpha coughed and coughed up stone dust. Her mother realized she was infected. She was helpless to find a cure. Then she remembered that Amen had died 8 years earlier. And all this was her mother's hallucination, as she herself had been infected with the virus. Alpha and her mother left home and set off on their final journey. A yellow storm and dust of those who had been turned to stone swirled all around. On the way, the mother again saw Amin and other relatives who were not actually there. Alpha saw her mother lying on the ground crying, and now the marks of turning to stone were visible on Alpha's own face. She realized that her entire family and neighbors had already been infected. By the end of the story, Alpha accepted this harsh reality. She decided that instead of crying, she would live the remaining moments of her life happily. Amidst the human dust scattered all around, she became calm. The story ends as a poignant tale of fear, loneliness, and ultimately acceptance of death. Friends, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.